we had an ensemble of a lot of different monsters, colorful monsters and everything. And so the shop decided to make a red one. They had Oscar and they had, Cookie Monster and, and they had all these different monsters, but they said it'd be nice to do it. So they just designed, they drew, and built it, and it became like for production numbers. We used to do a lot of production numbers with Muppets back then. And so he was just built as a red monster. And so what happened is, anybody who was in the insert would pick him up, But David Core, who was one of the writers at the time, really liked the character, really liked the way the puppet looked. So in his scripts, he would write about this little character, and the producer was like, "Who is this?" And they said, "Well," he said, "I'd love to use the red, this little red monster." Back then, Brian Meal, who was one of the puppeteers, very, very talented guy. He actually originated Barkley and Telly Monster on the show. Very funny actor and stuff like that. He left, he was doing, actually he did Barkley, he did Telly, he performed a character by the name of Nobel Price. Alphabet Bates was another character that he did a bunch of characters. And he took on, he was the first one to perform Elmo, and he had this little whispery voice, it was really sweet. But then he left the show and started pursuing his acting and writing career. And he left, and so now everybody the puppeteers that were there had to take over for his character. So as you well know, Marty Robinson took over Telly, and Barkley was taken over by another puppeteer. Nobel I actually took, and Richard Hunt, who is one of the most celebrated of the main Muppeteers with Jim and Frank and Jerry. He was one of the other main Muppeteers with Jim, and he took it over, and it wasn't his type of character. He started yelling. He was like, yes, 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 Elmo do this, Elmo do that. And Norman Stiles, who was the head writer at the time, really hated what he was doing. He would call up Lisa Simon, the producer, and say, "Listen, can you get him to stop screaming? This is not working, blah, blah, blah." So I was one of the Muppeteers. I was the only Muppeteer that was in the lounge that we had at the time. And Richard came in with the puppet, and he said, he threw it to me, and he said, "Come up with a voice." And I did the falsetto voice. He said, "Okay, fine." He took me to the control room where Lisa was and said, "Listen, I don't need to do this puppet. Apparently I'm not doing it right because Norman's calling over saying I'm not, Kevin has a voice for it, I'm gonna give it to him. Is that okay?" She said, "I don't care." And so that's how I got, to perform Elmo. I think we had like 2 or 3 more shows and the season was gonna be over, and one of them had Elmo in it. And I didn't know what to do. I felt as though Richard couldn't do anything. What was I gonna do with it? I got through that season, and then I went home and hung out with my mother and their daycare kids again. And, observed them and to see what I could bring to Elmo. And this little kid, Ryan, who was really, really funny. He was the type of kid that, one time he'd be crying like bloody murder. Somebody, did something to him. Next, in a second, he'd be laughing about something. So I love that kind of thing that the kids, it's just wait a minute and they'll change their personality. But also I thought about, I watched a lot of Muppet stuff, and I thought about the Muppet edge that Jim and Frank gave the characters and tried to figure that out. So the next season I came in, I did a little piece with Emilio Delgado, who plays Luis, at the Fix-It shop. And it was Elmo going on an imaginary vacation, and he was packing, imaginary clothes in a suitcase, and I figured it all out. And lo and behold, one of the camera guys, it was Frankie, who started laughing. And the first, time you get a laugh, you think you're doing something. So, that gave me the confidence to keep going. And then they took it out to research, and research saw that Elmo was working. The kids not only were laughing at him, but they were also learning what they were supposed to learn. And so they kept writing for him, and, now he's this, big celebrity now.